This is On Target St. John's, a look at politics, crime, education. What's happening here with the people who know. The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station. Now, your On Target St. John's host, Linda Swain.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. There's clearly something wrong with all of us, is all I have to say. Our special in-studio guest, no stranger to the VOCM airwaves, Dr. Janine Hubbard.
Hi.
As she's so accustomed to being on this show now, it's become a bit of a monthly practice to have you in. And we were both dancing, along with Greg Smith, our producer for this afternoon, dancing to the theme music leading into On Target.
Everyone needs a Tuesday afternoon mini dance party. Come on.
There you go. Clearly something wrong with all of us, but I'll let you diagnose us later. I've got you in, and I tweeted this out as a little teaser, I suppose. I have you in talking about fall. Now, fall is a time of year when you don't think of anything spectacular happening, but there are some interesting things happening. And I thought about you this week because I find when the time goes back, my mood goes down. And I find that I really dread the fall. I know there's an awful lot of people out there who say, oh, I love the fall, the colors, the fresh, crisp air, the cooler temperatures. But the fall, I've always dreaded it. I don't know if it's a combination of going back to school, but it is certainly, I know, something to do with the light. Because driving home in the dark and then sitting in a dark house with the lights on, the artificial light on, has always bothered me. And I know we used to call it seasonal affective disorder. Does that sound like seasonal affective disorder?
Well, it certainly could be. Yes, I mean, we're all affected by the time change. It's funny that 1 hour can often affect people far greater than, traveling overseas and trying to readjust to jet lag. And there's a variety of reasons for that we can talk about. But what we refer to as sometimes the winter blues, although in this case here maybe we're even moving it up into fall a little bit, was actually renamed a couple of years ago to reflect the fact that there is both kind of a mild version that happens to a lot of us, but for a smaller percentage of people, it can actually have a really significant impact. So it's actually been renamed depressive disorder with seasonal pattern. That being said, if you go to your doctor and say, I'm worried I have seasonal affective disorder, they'll still know exactly what you're talking about.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound that sexy anymore.
No, we can't call it SAD, which was just the best acronym ever because it just really helps sum up a lot of the feelings we were all having.
How does it affect people?
What we know is about 2 to 6% of the population actually presents as a significant and severe form of depression. And then we know that about 15% up to maybe about 30% of us have a milder form of it, where it, it does kind of hit us as kind of a case of the blues. I'll talk about some of the specific symptoms. Here you go. What we know a little bit is it's most likely to hit adults, particularly kind of between 20 and 50, most likely to hit women, and most likely to hit those of us who live in northern hemispheres. So congratulations if you're a middle-aged woman. Guess what? We are and I'm looking at Linda and I, we're both going, yep, check, check, check. We know that we are at higher risk of it for sure.
Any reason why?
There's few things we wonder about. One of the things that we believe is that the decrease in sunlight that comes with winter, and again, it's really noticeable this week because we're used to our schedules either being able to drive home in the light or drive in the light, and now you're not having light for either of it for most of us. We know that decrease in sunlight exposure can mess around with a couple of our neurotransmitters. It can affect serotonin, which you hear about. That's kind of the happy hormone. That's the one that helps regulate our mood. And it also affects melatonin, which is what affects our sleep and our mood. So between those two things, we don't know exactly what's happening, but we know that lack of vitamin D, that lack of sunlight exposure for some people who are susceptible can really affect a number of things around your mood.
Is it worse in some places than others? I know the northern hemisphere, but do Canadians cope with it better than, say, people in Finland or Russia or, I don't know,
Yeah,
Sweden?
it's a really good question. And I think some of it comes down to some cultural differences. Some of it comes down to how much do you embrace getting outdoors, engaging in outdoor activity, even if it's really cold. If you are in a place where, you know what, you might have a whole load of snow and it's really cold, but it's sunny and you can get outside and get involved in some activities, do some snowing, do some snowshoeing, some skiing, any of those kind of things, that can really help. So again, a lot of the Nordic countries you were making really embrace a lot of those outdoor activities. So we know that for some places we may see some variation.
Well, I know in some European countries, they roll their eyes at Canadians because for whatever reason, we seem to hate winter, even though it is part of our lives, a big part of our lives. And when you think about winter, it's a great time to be out there getting involved in various recreation, but for some reason we dread it, we hate it, we don't want to talk about it. Every time somebody says snow, everybody says, oh, don't say the S word. Those kinds of things. It's almost like we're in this perpetual state of denial. Does that add to that level of...
Some of it, yeah, certainly some of the attitude and how you go about approaching it, but a lot of it has to do with your own personal history and experiences and what kind of symptoms you've had in the past. Because we know that some of the symptoms are very much what we experience in typical depression. So things like sleeping more, having low energy, kind of feeling, lethargic, withdrawing from social activities, not wanting to go out, not wanting to engage, sometimes some irritability, some trouble focusing. Like those are things that we often do see in all forms of depression. A couple of the hallmarks, though, which is really interesting, and we all do this to a tiny extent, you get things like intense cravings for carbohydrates. It's that exactly. When we think about all of our typical winter comfort foods, they fit into this. And the other thing that's important to kind of note is for yourself, your own pattern. Is this something where you're doing fine and then kind of fall hits, the time change hits, and all of a sudden you have a shift, and then in the spring, boom, you're back to your old perky self? Then that's maybe something to be proactive about. And that's why I'm so glad we're talking about it now and not in the middle of February, which is when we typically talk about this conversation. Because if you are someone who has had this pattern, there is treatment available. And it's time to start it now, not when you're in the throes of the middle of winter.
So what is the treatment? I know in some countries like Siberia, for instance, in Russia, it's often light therapy, that kind of thing. Does that work?
Believe it or not, and I was as skeptical as many when it was first introduced, light therapy can be incredibly effective. And the good news is that has really significantly come down in cost. I mean, they used to be just prohibitively expensive. You can now get them at many local kind of places that sell home appliances. Costco has had one. I've seen them in a variety of places, and they're often less than $100. And I have one in my office because I work in a windowless office during the daytime. And so when winter hits, I drive to work in the dark. I'm not exposed to daylight all day long, and I drive home in the dark. And what they found is using it for about 20, 30 minutes in the morning, same time consistently. I just put mine on when I'm checking my email and having my morning cup of tea. They have found that can have a really significant difference for people. So that's a quick, relatively inexpensive solution. Some of the other things that we know, there's also what they call dawn stimulators. That's kind of a form of an alarm clock that at home starts to kind of mimic dawn in your bedroom, even though dawn actually isn't occurring outside yet. And again, it's felt that has an effect, especially on like the serotonin levels.
How do you mimic dawn?
Well, it's an alarm that very gradually kind of emerges with light. So it's a very soft, gentle light that starts out just like, if you think about the light that would come into your bedroom window on a normal sunrise. It's that same kind of idea. So it starts very soft and gentle. So it's not like a light going off abruptly and waking you up, but it's often happening even for, the half hour to hour before you actually get up and the alarm goes off. So again, it's signaling those neurotransmitters. It's signaling things around the serotonin production to kind of get you ready to face the day.
And it's not just any type of light. I know they've been doing some research on that. It has to be a certain type of light, is it not? It
does.
Can't be yellow or white or something like that. I'm not sure what it is.
No, and again, I apologize, I don't know the specific science behind it, but it's called blue light therapy, generally speaking, and there's something about the particular light waves that they have determined assist with this.
It's fascinating stuff. Dr. Janine Hubbard is our in-studio guest for On Target St. John's. We'll be back right after this.
This is On Target St. John's on VOCM.
From breaking news to every big story that affects Newfoundland and Labrador, VOCM is there. You want access to the decision makers. You want to hear from the biggest newsmakers. You want to know what your neighbors are thinking. VOCM is there. VOCM, the province's most trusted news voice since 1936. And here today to cover every major event and story that will shape our future. Newfoundland and Labrador's news leader. This is VOCM.
Now back to Linda Swain on Target St. John's on VOCM.
And we're back on Target St. John's. Dr. Janine Hubbard is our in-studio guest, and for our listeners, she's very familiar to many of you. We've had her on a monthly basis so far, and we're talking about things that happen in the fall, and one of them is the waning of the light. And we were talking a little bit about light therapy and ways to address that, because the solstice is a little over a month away, so we're getting to the darkest period of the year, even though it's not quite winter yet. What are some other therapies or
treatments? And you're quite
thank
right.
you.
This is a very I know I hit that with the time change this week. It was and it's going to get worse before it starts to get better, isn't it? It would be one thing if the time change hit right at kind of the worst and you could at least be optimistic, but to know that we're just going to have more darkness does have an impact on your mood for sure. In terms of more what we consider kind of like that milder version of the winter blues, there are a number of lifestyle things you can do. They're all way easier said than done. So things like forcing yourself to get outside. If it is a sunny day, get out, get that vitamin D exposure. It's really vitally important, even when you're not feeling it. Listen, borrow somebody's dog, take them for a walk. They'll be grateful. You'll be grateful. Whether it's getting out and shoveling the snow when it's halfway decent. Anything where you're getting outside and getting some of that natural light exposure. Also, and again, I always caution, check with your physician or your pharmacist before looking at any supplements. But there's been some really good evidence to show that vitamin D, which makes sense because that's what you're getting from the sunlight, can be really effective as a supplement. And in fact, I know they've done a ton of research here that sort of as a population, we're pretty chronically deprived of our vitamin D. I'm cautious because I know it can interfere with absorption of some other products. So just always be cautious and check with the people who know these things. And again, some of it is things like making sure you're getting regular exercise, making sure you're not giving into the couch potato, literally sitting on the couch eating the carbs.
That hibernation
tendency that we all have. So the more you can make sure that you're getting some exercise, that you're keeping an eye on, what is the portion of my fruits and vegetable servings to the cinnamon buns, because that is our go-to. And unfortunately, that just continues to escalate the symptoms for most of us. What I would say, though, is if you're somebody who's listening to this and you're thinking, man, you know what, this sounds like me, this sounds like something I have really struggled with in the past. Remember, I said that for 2 to 6% of the population, that's a big chunk of the population. It is a diagnosable clinical condition. It is a form of depression. I know we all joke it off a little bit because it is something that affects so many of us, but for some people, it can really be almost disabling. Talk to your physician, reach out, look at some help. We do know that a combination of medication and therapy is the treatment of choice for people in the more severe form of things, and be proactive about it. Like I say, I'm thrilled we're talking about this topic now and not when people are in the throes of hibernation in the middle of February.
I find I make a lot of excuses, and I'm sure others are very similar. You say, well, I'm going to take the dog out, but it's dark, and I don't know if it's going to be slippery, and there's snowbanks when it's later on in the year, and, it's awfully cold out there, and, my coat is not not as good as I need to get a new coat for, we always
We
make
always
these excuses.
do. And even if you're having a hard time at that time of day, even maybe making it more of a routine and get a buddy or colleagues to say, listen, let's go out for a little bit of fresh air. And I mean this as truly a fresh air break, not a, in quotes, fresh air break for
I got you.
the people who go out for those, and go out midday. Go out and, on your lunch break. Get a chance just to get, even if it's 10, 15 minutes of fresh air and some exposure. Can certainly help to ward off a lot of the symptoms.
But wait till after the show.
Well, yes, there you go.
I mean, looking outside, it's looking very inviting out there right now, I have to say. And there's nothing better than that crisp walk in the woods or a wooded area with the leaves crunching under you.
Go kick the leaves around.
And that crispness of the air. And it really does, I don't know, clean the cobwebs out.
Well, we know that fresh air and nature and exercise are good for all mental health issues. And it's something actually we are really lucky with in Newfoundland and Labrador that for most of us, we can access that within about 5-10 minutes. It's to me one of the absolute joys is I can go home, throw on some grubbies, grab the dog, and literally be in the middle of the woods in 10 minutes. And that's something that I think we take for granted and we forget how lucky we are to be able to take advantage of that. So really making use of it. And again, if you're a winter sports enthusiast, get out on that skidoo, get out on that snowmobile, make sure you're taking advantage or the snowshoes are great. The skis are great. Even just going for a walk, even if it's just through your neighborhood.
Embrace the winter.
Indeed.
And we're not used to doing that. We'll complain about the sidewalks and that, but there are activities that you can get involved in and get your friends involved.
And that's often the one of the solutions for any kind of lifestyle change is making it a public commitment and getting a buddy. Those are some of the things that can, and also make it, I forgot my acronym now, but make it quantifiable. Make it something that you can do every day that's manageable. So don't suddenly say, oh yeah, every weekend I'm going out for a 3-hour hike. No, it's I'm going to walk around the block once and work on it being very achievable for you.
I was telling you during the break, but last year was the first winter I can remember really, truly enjoying for a very long time because the little fellow went in hockey and we were getting up relatively early and it was sunny like it is now and you get to walk in the winter wonderland, so to speak, and you're still up at a half decent time because, of course, it's common then to cuddle into that bed and stay there a little longer than you should and all those kinds of things. So it got us up and active and outside, and I loved last winter.
Yep. And it's interesting, and you and I were talking, one of the disadvantages of Newfoundland that is a little atypical in terms of seasonal affective disorder or winter blues, whatever you want to call it, is a lot of us are hit by symptoms in the spring. Because in the same way we currently have this, winter's coming, in the spring it's the winter's never going to end. And then we often get a little brief glimpse and then we hit the fog bank. And then we hit Capeland weather. And I actually know a lot of people who have more difficulty with that time period. Because again, it's that lack of sunlight. It's that lack of exposure that they do okay during the winter because they're very conscious about getting out and embracing the sunshine. But when we get that 2-week bank of, the RDF, the rain, drizzle, fog, that can actually be a time that people really struggle with.
Well, indeed, because the summer solstice, we often don't see the sun during that particular day, and it's often something that we all talk about. And another one is Canada Day.
I was going to say, how many times have I gone for the sunrise ceremony on Canada Day where there is no sign of a sunrise?
It's just a slow gradient of gray.
Yep. And fog.
So we're very familiar with that here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and you're absolutely right, because it's that extended, cold, wet, miserable, dark weather that the rest of Canada thinks we have this terrible weather, and I think it's because of the spring.
Right.
That they have that perception, but of course we have those beautiful icebergs too, so there is a silver lining.
And that's how you try to embrace that time period is go, okay, it's Capeland weather, which means, hey, we can get out and go and get our Capeland. But yes, go iceberg hunting. Take the day and go looking for them. Know that the whales are about to come in. Embrace some of those activities. I think what we're hearing with all of this is, in true Newfoundland fashion, have a bit of sense of humor about some of it. Embrace the good days, embrace it when Mother Nature is treating us well. But if this is something that has a serious impact on you, please don't hesitate to reach out and get help. What is a very mild inconvenience for a lot of us is a really significant and major medical condition for others, and it can be treated, and there is help available.
Another thing that comes around this time of year, and it does fill quite a few people with a certain level of anxiety, is flu season. It's not so much the flu as it is the flu shot. And we'll talk a little bit about that right after this.
This